Hey, I guess I filed that one away. It looks like I did get it.
Well, it also looks like nobody else has checked their email.
Um,
It's just you and me.
yeah. I bet if you try to join the other one, there would be a bunch of people in it.
Let me do that. Okay, this one's being recorded right now. Let me try to, can I do this if this is somebody else's Zoom call?
Uh,
Here,
you
I'm
can
gonna leave.
try. Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave and come back. Yeah, so there were several people on my link.
Do you want to stop the recording and then when people get in, start
I
again?
can't stop this recording. This isn't my meeting.
Okay. Should be a nice couple minutes of just me on it.
I'll put some music on.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Hello.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello again.
So I'll say this later when everybody else is on, but I'm still going through the draft. I've just been swamped today and yesterday with work, and last night with a very long meeting.
It sure was. And I had the advantage of being on the Pacific time zone.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, I bet Richard's not as tired as we are.
Yeah, I was just hungry.
Much longer than expected, that was for sure.
Yeah, my God.
I'd take a couple of snack breaks in the middle with my camera off, but.
And some of us got some sleep.
Oh, good for you.
So, does anyone know why News 12 is CC'd on the Zoom link for this meeting?
Because it's been a noticed meeting.
Right, no, we've never had News 12, like a local news channel. So I just thought that was...
Yeah, so the village said they didn't want to use the link that I had sent out earlier because this needs to be a publicly noticed meeting, and in addition to recording it, it needed to be transcribed, and we didn't have the ability to do that. So this morning they sent out the new link, and I and the news channel was included in that.
Oh. So you have to tell the news.
Because it's a public meeting, yeah. I think they were included in the public meetings that we've had on Saturday morning.
Okay. Yeah, maybe that's where I missed it. I just saw it on the email and thought it was kind of
Yeah.
weird.
They have been to at least one of those, and that's what they used to make the story that they did.
Oh, I see. I didn't.
Oh,
see
yeah.
Did you all happen to see that story?
No.
Yeah, somebody, who sent it? I don't know. Mike, did you send it? Somebody sent it.
I think I remember the headline being like kind of off.
Yeah, the headline was
Yeah.
that it was the police's idea.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I was like, OPD is doing this. We're like, eh?
I don't think that the mayor is going to be able to join us tonight. That's my memory of it, that the mayor is not joining us.
Yeah, she had. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what kind of agenda you have in mind, Richard. I would love to hear that. But one of the things, so what I have in mind that I would love to cover, and I know everyone's not on yet, so we'll repeat all this information, but for the purpose of getting started, I would love to hear from you all, just debriefing on last night's call, about how that went and any takeaways from that. Number two, I would love to go through the specific recommendations that I have questions about and get your thoughts on those. And that's going to be helpful as I discuss the recommendations with my colleagues next week. And then number three, I would love to talk about what the next steps are for implementation in this body, whether it's that the group stays in its current form or changes, and if so, how. So those are the three things: debrief, recommendations, next steps. What else, Richard, is on your mind that you'd like to cover, or anyone else?
Well, the number two is the primary thought that I had about this meeting, because we've got limited time to finalize this report and get it to the Board of Trustees on Friday. So that's the one. That's the one that we have to do. So debrief would be a great way to get started. And so in going through the report, it starts. I thought that we would open it up for each chapter discussion about specific recommendations, et cetera, and talk about the things that matter to people. The first chapter is the introduction, and that's that's the area where we expanded the report to talk about the implementation process. So we left it to the village to determine whether it's this committee, but we strongly recommended that the working committee be expanded, consistent with much of the input that we've received here in the last couple of months. So if you saw that.
Got it. Okay, that's great.
You want to start with a debrief?
Yeah, in the interest of time, I know that people will roll in, but because I have the board meeting and I want to make sure that we cover our bases. So the floor is open. I would love to hear what you feel went well last night, what you feel could have been better, your general takeaways.
Wait, are you asking Matrix or are you asking?
No, I'm asking the group. It's an open question to the group. As the spirit moves you, whomever, including you, Maite, anyone in the group, what'd you think of last night?
I mean, did it achieve the objectives that you had hoped to achieve when you asked for the meeting? That'd be an important thing for us to hear, I think.
I guess I was expecting a little bit more questions from the trustees in terms of exactly, like maybe what we're going to do today, where they kind of reviewed the draft and had specific questions. But I thought it was positive. I mentioned it last night. I wish that type of meeting would have happened a long time ago. I thought we had, pretty good dialogue. It was, seemed to be understanding in terms of, all parties. And, I just wish it would have been sooner. and maybe to have heard from the trustees like more specific questions?
Yeah, I think it would have been helpful if on the 24th of February the work session had been truly a work session devoted to going over the first part of the draft, because we would have had a better gauge of kind of where we needed to be clearer, or where there were questions or concerns. It was such an open agenda that it was hard to kind of focus. So that's why we called the special meeting, because the work session, why I was really passionate about the special meeting was because there wasn't a work session dedicated to it. So you essentially only have one work session to talk about it. So I think it was productive. I just wish I could have gotten a better gauge of kind of where the trustees were at, so we could have better devoted our time, because I didn't know, where to really focus. But I was really grateful to have the conversation, and I think that the trustees probably seemed like, we're here if they need to reach out again, if they need another meeting and need to devote more time.
Yeah, I thought it was helpful. I think maybe we probably should have prepared a little bit more about how we wanted to do the presentation. I know a lot of us were kind of burnt out, so we didn't quite, like, I sort of had in my head some ideas rolling around about how it would go, but we didn't all have a conversation about it. But despite that, I do think that it went well, and I think it would be helpful to have another one of those, maybe a little bit more structured, where we talk about, where we actually talk through some of the things that we added in, because I think we didn't quite cover everything. So for the public, if they haven't read the updated version, which most people I would imagine haven't, then I don't think they got a full picture of the things that we added to it. But there's still a little bit of time for that.
And there's a meeting next week. The work session on Wednesday. So
Yeah.
I think Kendall, are you saying something to us?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think the meeting served as it was a meeting that we called, but I think that it also served as a platform for us to be honest. I think that a lot of our feedback before the meeting ended was that we wish that this meeting had happened sooner. So I think that in that respect, it served a really valuable purpose. We got a chance to, I think, be honest with each other in terms of, our committee and the Board of Trustees, and to voice a lot of inside opinions. So that part of it, I think, was very productive. We're still in the process of doing some things, so a lot still needs to be unfolded. But as it stands now, I think the meeting was productive last night.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, you want to get started with the report?
Here's my recommendation, if possible. I don't want to derail us, but I also want to be mindful of time.
Mm-hmm.
I have specific questions about specific recommendations that I would love to get your thoughts on.
Okay.
And if we could start with those, and then that way you after that, then you can go through the whole report. That way, I just don't want to run out of time.
No, I appreciate that. I want to be mindful of that. We can do that with everybody, actually. I mean, we don't have to structure it where we go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's just get started with you.
Great. Okay. So my first question is about in governance, oversight, and transparency. So the recommendation: prohibit including or addressing criminal records for complainants, even if known to the police. This would prevent disclosing any information that may sway CPCRB members before they review all the information necessary to make a determination. So this is a question that thank you, Christina, for including the page number. My question here is I just don't know enough about what is included and not included when the CPCRB is deliberating an investigation and making a recommendation. And so I'm not sure of what the consequences would be, intended or unintended, of not having those records available. So is there anyone that could illuminate that for me?
Certainly, Jennifer.
Yeah, so that was Roe's recommendation. I haven't seen that happen in any of the complaints that we've reviewed just yet, but it's been a little over a year and a pandemic year where there's not as many complaints because there isn't as much police interaction. That said, when we review complaints, I think we're really supposed to be looking at the incident that took place. So having outside information about the person's criminal history or something like that is probably not exactly relevant. So what we're reviewing is the interaction that happened, and that's what we're making a judgment on. So having that information might sway somebody in a way that they're no longer just looking objectively at what happened in the incident, but they're taking into account things that aren't necessarily relevant to what happened.
So that I'm clear, because that's helpful. And I'll make something up. So there's an incident between a police officer and someone, and they're driving, right? And you all are deliberating it. And it turns out that this person, the driver in the incident, has a long record of DWIs. And that information is irrelevant to the specific case that you have in front of you, but that could sway you because you may go, well, this person is an irresponsible driver, and so blah, 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 blah. Yeah. My question is, would that information be a part of the case in front of you? Like, would you already have, how would you learn that information?
Presumably that would be in the report. So what happens is that the investigator prepares like a summary of what happened. So he kind of summarizes what the complaint was. He speaks to the complainant and speaks to the officer involved. And then if there were any witnesses or anybody else that may have seen it, then he would talk to them as well. He reviews any footage, body cam footage, that type of thing. And then presents all of the relevant evidence to us. So I would imagine that, I imagine that this is something that Roe actually experienced when he was on the CPCRB. He's not here to clarify that part. But my guess is that it would be during that presentation when he's kind of summarizing the entire thing. I don't know, Chief, if you
Sure.
specifically something like that happened.
I was there for the meetings that Rodolfo attended, and I can tell you that it was never included. I can tell you that that would never be included. It's part of due process. It's one of the things I argue all the time, is that both the complainant and the police officer are entitled to a fair amount of fairness, right? Due process. That's what I've been talking about from the beginning. So it's never been included. So I'm not really sure why it's here. What I can tell you is that I specifically recall one or more meetings when Rodolfo was on the board where a person who had filed probably dozens of complaints over the years, and the board had been together for a very long time, that civilian board members would say, oh, that's so-and-so again. So there are people that after sitting for a period of time on the board may become familiar with a person's past. But I can tell you that in all the meetings that I went to, and I was presenting to the CCRB the entire time that Rodolfo was on the board, there never, to my knowledge, was ever a report that was delivered with someone's criminal history in it. In fact, we wouldn't be permitted to disclose a criminal history for that purpose anyway. So a criminal history report is a carefully guarded document. It's not part of our report unless the unless the arrest itself was relevant to the case. In other words, that we're here because this person complained that during an arrest, that this process was that whatever their complaint may be during that process. But no, we don't bring complaints and say, just so you know, this person's got 5 DWI arrests in the past. That would never happen.
Got it. Thank you, Chief. And I guess the follow-up question for me there is, already the information that has been provided is super helpful. But if the same would be true on the officer side. So if we were to say, let's say we were to have something like this, would we also include not including any previous complaints about an officer?
Ordinarily, we present the case with, here's what happened on that date and here's who the 2 people are. I've read a lot of the recommendations. I'm not sure that that's not the intention of the board to be able to do that. So I don't know, you'd have to ask them what their intention is. In terms of this recommendation, I can tell you that presenting people's history in order to judge a complaint has never been part of the case.
Okay, thank you, Chief. It looks like Ro has joined us. Hi, Ro.
Hey guys, how are you? Can you hear me?
Doing well. Yes, we can hear you. So we're going through some of the recommendations, and there's one that came up that we'd like to ask you about. It's the one around prohibiting the inclusion of criminal records or complaints, even if known to for complainants, even if known to police. It sounds like this is not something that has come up before, but wanted to clarify, is this something that has come up before?
I think most of the situations we have are in things that have come up before, right? So I think it's really just the preventive, just kind of make sure that that's in there for preventive measures, just so everyone's aware and make it a very explicit thing so it doesn't happen. At least during my tenure there, I don't remember that ever happening.
Okay, thank you, Ro. That is helpful. Mm-hmm. Next, the policy, under policies and procedures, develop policy to require reporting misconduct by department personnel. Is this not already a policy?
There is a specific policy not to report, but to intervene. That's
isn't that separate? Or...
Yeah. But there isn't a specific policy to report.
It's in the articles that it requires anybody that observes misconduct or unlawful behavior has to report it to a supervisor immediately. I'll find it later if you need it. I think I cited it in my memo, Omar.
Okay.
John will be on a little bit, so he can add to that. He's the one who did the research on that. He's going to be late into this meeting.
It's very possibly overlooked something. I'm telling you what we have in our manual. I'll provide it to you later.
Yeah.
We spoke about that during the policies with the chief.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
Okay, next, remove a rule that bars the CPCRB from reviewing complaint cases where either the OPD employee or complainant is the subject of an ongoing criminal investigation. The way that when I read the language that went around this, the idea was that if a police officer committed an egregious crime, then their case would still be ongoing by the time that, if you're following the complaint cycle, within X number of days, and it's in here within a 30-day period, I think it is, whatever it is, that the complaint needs to come in and then follow the whole thing. That case may not be solved or settled by the time the complaint comes around, and so if that's the case, then you wouldn't be able to review it. Is that right? And so the request is we'd like to be able to review those kinds of cases as well.
Well, it's not just that. It's actually two things. So yes, that situation, but also when the complainant is the subject of a criminal proceeding, we can't investigate a complaint that they may have made. And that is the part that I am especially uncomfortable with, because if something happens during an arrest, then the complainant is, you know, like the complainant is arrested and they say, you know, there was excessive force or something like that, we're not going to be able to review that complaint. And that has already happened.
Sorry, I was in motion and I heard like half of that. And so I apologize. So the idea is, oh, sorry, can you just say one more time? I'm really sorry.
Yeah, so basically if something happens during an arrest, excessive force or something like that, and the complainant, their criminal proceeding has not concluded yet, which takes a while, we can't investigate their complaint again about excessive force. That's the way that the code is written right now. And we've already had a situation where there was a complaint about something that happened during an arrest, and we weren't able to review that complaint.
So you can't review it ever, or you can't review it within the window?
You can't review it while the case is being is going through the court system. So, but the case is against the complainant. They were arrested for whatever, and now when they make a complaint about what happened during the arrest, and it could be separate also the way it's written, but if something were to happen during an arrest, the complainant is arrested, they still have to go through the court process. And if they've made a complaint, we can't review it.
Omar, there's a distinction should be made that the Civilian Complaint Review Board doesn't review complaints. They review the department's investigation of complaints. So there's no delay. Hang on one second. I'll explain what's going on. You've had your time. There's nothing stopping the complaint from being investigated. They're investigated immediately, and there's a mechanism for if that's mishandled. This board's duty is to review those investigations to ensure that they're done thoroughly and fairly and timely. The investigations commence immediately. There's issues of disclosing evidence from an active case. The criminal case is always going to take precedence over administrative function. Still, that doesn't stop us from taking disciplinary action, and that's specifically written into the code.
Got it. Okay. Jennifer, did you have something to add?
So that may be the case, but I don't know how specific I can be about the situation that has happened that I'm aware of, because I know that we have confidentiality rules.
Right.
But there was a complaint that we have not reviewed the investigation for, and it was for this reason. From 2018.
Okay, I got it. I'm gonna put a pin in this one. I need a little bit more, not information, because I can't necessarily get more information on the specifics, but just I'll put a pin in that one. Okay, next.
Real quick, just for clarification, Jennifer, did you say 2015 or 2018 was when the complaint was made?
2019, actually.
Okay.
Okay, great. Next, the village needs to evaluate the role of police officers in the schools and whether a presence is desired at all. So my question here is, who is the last part of the sentence, and whether a presence is desired at all, by whom?
So if I can just start, this is one of the suggested edits made in the revisions suggested by the 8 people on the working committee, and we added it. So the idea here is that in the implementation process, that for the working committee or for whatever body is has the oversight of the implementation process, would develop a strategy including public input to help define what the suggested roles of school resources officers are, or the police department's involvement in the school. So if there is an involvement, there's a suggestion about specific training, the types of officers who would be involved in this, and what their roles would be. So there's a full spectrum there that the desire was to have a clearer understanding of what those roles would be, and a process for supporting that. Jennifer or Maita, either of you, I think, had that.
Sure, I think with your question, Omar, by whom? The students. When we had the when I had the meeting with Ossining High School students, one of the biggest things that came up for them was the SRO, and they didn't really understand why the SRO was in the school. They appreciated that the SRO didn't wear like a full-on uniform. However, he's still armed and they can see the gun, makes them very uncomfortable. And I guess they say he doesn't wear a uniform, but he wears all black. So it's like they know who he is. So it's kind of a uniform. He doesn't wear all black. That's what I was told. Maybe that's just how he likes to dress. It could be.
We have 2 SROs.
Okay.
One, Connor Tompkins, who's the lacrosse coach at the high school. He's not unfamiliar to most of the students. He's the football coach at Sleepy Hollow. The other is Ed Walker, who, if you're from Ossining and you don't know Ed Walker, you need to spend more time in Ossining, because everybody knows Ed Walker. But Ed normally dresses in bow ties and colorful stuff. He's sort of known for his attire. If
That's
Connor
what
wears,
I was told by the students. I don't know. I graduated 2012. I don't know Ed Walker or the other SRO. I don't know if I need to spend more time in my school after I graduated, but
if Connor wears black shirts, it's just the choice of attire that he has on for the day.
That's what I was saying. Like,
There is no
they dress in all black. That could be a possibility.
I see him just about every day, and I don't know I've ever seen him dress in all black, but if that's what the students saw.
So let me interject here quickly. So during the public review process, as well as in our working committee and subcommittee meetings, we had input on all of these recommendations. Many of these recommendations, suggested recommendations, had consistent input to us. Certainly on the policies, the governance things within the committee, and as we reviewed them publicly, consistent input. This is one of those areas where there was not consistent input, except for the students. The students who were involved in the focus group that we had there made the statements that Maita said. That's absolutely true, that it was intimidating, and some students were fearful of the police presence in the schools. However, within the working committee and in the public input, we heard the wide range of input to us, from them being in the school to them not being in the schools at all. So this is one where the suggested recommendation was, let's develop a process where we are just looking at that after April the 1st and come up with what we, being the village, wants for police department presence in the school. And this is something that has a national dialogue, not just in Ossining.
Yeah, I think Richard said, right, the recommendation is that this, like many other things that we haven't really been able to address, that it continue to be talked about, which is why the recommendation is that the village might still push the conversation. And I think I heard that Mayor Levin said last night that this is a little bit more has to do with the Board of Education and their decision in terms of having SROs or not. But just being able to have this open dialogue just on this specific topic would be helpful in order to make proper recommendations. I mean, same as most of the things that we've been talking about, I think it has to do, again, with the communication, right? Students don't feel comfortable. We need to listen to them. They don't really know why they're there. And so some education needs to happen in terms of the schools. And then I just think that we also just have to have more positive relationships with the youth and the police. And that could even help in terms of when it comes to community policing, when it comes to hiring, our own, and hiring, police officers that are from Ossining. or at least having some type of mentorship program. But I think there is something like that at OPD, right? Chief, like an internship program or something?
We stopped taking interns because of COVID. We've had high school and college interns. High school interns tend to have to stay in the building. We really prefer to take the college ones because over 18, you can go on the road and do more meaningful stuff.
Okay. Yeah, but the intention is to, keep the conversation going.
That's helpful. I appreciate it. So to me, that I see no harm in, and in fact, a lot of benefit around clarifying the role of officers in the schools, because throughout this process, I've learned a lot about how the police department works with the schools and all that. So I think that clarifying that more widely for the community could be helpful. I think the student piece to me is a bit trickier, because to say students feel this way, students, there's some students feel that way. I would not pretend to say all students feel any one way. It's any group of people, there's a multiplicity of opinions. And so it may be that they are feeling uncomfortable, maybe the gun piece, and so maybe that's something to explore. But this has been helpful. Okay. So next, the police department should have a 30-day period for public comment before a policy is implemented, except under emergency or immediate need circumstances. So this is not something that, as far as I know, that exists with any other department, police or otherwise, anywhere. Would love to get more clarity around how this would be helpful.
I'll just intervene and start off by saying that, yes, there's a lot of past practice, which in the last year is changing, and getting public input on specific policy changes, especially relating to use of force, some of the things relating to racism and policies and racial equity and issues like that are being reviewed in the public in many departments now.
So would your recommendation be, thank you, Jennifer, page 11, would your recommendation be then limited to specific kinds of policies? It just says policies.
That's a really good point. It would probably make sense to have that relate to policies relating to use of force and
I think the reason that this came up, and I wasn't on the subcommittee, so I may have this wrong, but I believe that the reason this came up was because of that LGBTQ policy that came into being without input from that community. I don't know if anybody else was on the subcommittee that came up with this recommendation, but that was my understanding from them.
I wasn't, but I do know that there are a number of departments that do have a process like that. Portland Police Bureau being one, where they'll send out like a bulletin through like Twitter, social media, saying that they're seeking input on new directives. I can send a link, but basically just I think any kind of policy like this one I just clicked on is return to work policy, but it just kind of provides that avenue, even if for dialogue, even if it doesn't ultimately change anything.
And Jennifer, you're right about the LGBTQ policy that was written by the department without input from that community.
Thank you.
That was never asked. So while everybody said there was no input from the community, I'm fine with getting things wrong, and I want to make sure that no one's ever offended by anybody. But nobody ever asked where we got that policy from or who helped us create it. So to say there was no input is not accurate. I'm not claiming in any way, shape, or form that policy is ideal, but there have been a lot of times where we keep saying that, well, the department didn't do and the department didn't do. There have been very, very few instances where any questions have been asked about how we got to any point or what we do in any particular time. I'll tear that policy down and we'll start all the way over. We may not have spoke with anybody here in Ossining, but to say that we didn't get input would be incorrect.
So where did you get your input from, Chief?
We took most of that policy from White Plains, who drafted it very closely with the loft.
So I spoke with the loft about this. I don't know if they can't answer, but I did not hear that the loft worked with OPD.
No, we didn't. No. I'm not suggesting that we went to them. What I'm saying is I worked with officers from other departments around the county in the community, and we took the policy. That policy is almost directly, with the exception of some things that are more restrictive, from the White Plains policy, which was crafted directly with the loft. So my point is not that we got it right. And my point is not that we asked everybody that we could have or should have, but we make a lot of these statements about not getting input or what we did or didn't do. No one ever asked that question.
Well, I guess my question is, where would you direct that question? For example, I found out about this policy on Facebook, and then it was posted on Facebook in July. I couldn't find it, and I don't even know, like, would I call the police and ask for it? How would I go about finding it? It just said on Facebook that there was a policy. Once I joined this committee in October, I kept asking for it, and I finally reached out to one of the people on the policy subcommittee so that I could read it. So,
So
again,
I'm here and no one ever asked me for it.
well,
But they didn't know. They didn't know what to ask.
To be really honest with you, it's like I didn't feel like I could ask you once I joined in October because of how, personally, how combative I felt that you've been on these meetings. So I didn't even feel comfortable at that point reaching out to you because I didn't know if it would be a conversation. That's just honestly how I felt. And reading the policy, it didn't seem like there was input.
Right.
If
But
there
my
was
point
input, it was input from 5 or 10 years ago based off the language in that policy. So all I'm saying is I would love to have a conversation with you about this more productively than where we're at right now. Let me know the best way to do that. And I do think that it would be great if local community members could have a conversation because White Plains is much bigger than Ossining. The loft is fantastic, so I'm really happy to hear that they worked with them, and yeah, let me know.
So to answer your questions, if you want a police department policy, you have to usually go to the police department. Right now, the reason I'm upset is not because of any review of that particular policy. It's not my experience. I can't speak to it. So if it's incorrect, I accept that. That's fine. What I'm simply speaking to, it actually has nothing to do with the content of that policy. That's not what I'm arguing. What I'm saying is throughout this process, there have been comments time and time again where we say about things the police department did and didn't do. No one ever asks. No one's asked the police department how we do most of the things you're talking about here. That's my point. Not you, Christina. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying through this process, the process that we've gone under, we say things like, well, the police department doesn't do this or they do that. There's been very little question about whether we do or don't or how we do it. It's a bunch of assumptions about what's going on. And I think that if we really want this to be successful, the question has to be, what does the police department do? You can look in the book and you can try and find something. And if you miss something, you might really miss something important. Not about this particular policy. I'm talking about overall. Policing is huge. And I think there's a lot of stuff in that book that people are not going to find digging through it. But if you ask the people on the policy group, the first thing I said when we sat down was, do you want to know where the most important policies are? And do you want to know where the biggest problems are that probably should be addressed right away? That's the position we took. I'm not trying to hide anything. I want to get this right. I was the first one to come up and say we need to get this right. But I would just appreciate if we don't say things like, well, the police department didn't get input, or if we don't know that, then say we got it wrong. I have no problem with getting it wrong. But to assume that we didn't try, that's not fair. Because there are almost no departments in Westchester County that have an LGBTQ and trans policy. That to me was meaningful. I got it wrong. I accept that. But it wasn't for lack of trying.
So I appreciate that. I'm sorry to jump in, Richard. I'm mindful of time, and I treasure your thoughts when it comes to these recommendations. And so with deep respect, I'll just want to move this along. Just say
one thing about just one last thing. I do think that there is a difference between talking to the White Plains Police Department and talking with the local LGBTQ community, which is the thing that we were saying didn't happen, and it sounds like that didn't happen. So I do just want to be clear about that.
And that is the intent of the recommendation, to get local input. It's one thing to do research and comparative survey on a policy change, and it's another thing to get specific input from the community that is affected by the change in policy.
Just to really briefly clarify, I actually think it's good to have a combination of both, to have a collaborative local input with oversight from an official organization, because oftentimes they have, you know, the most information about it, so that it's collaborative.
Yeah. My sense is that we've gotten into a little bit of a different territory. There's more agreement than disagreement with all of this, particularly in this area. I know that the chief is committed to getting it right, and I know that you all are as well, and so I want to do that. So I just want to refocus us on this 30-day period for public comment. Like if the chief, and I this may be small, but this is a recommendation we're considering, and so I want to really understand it. If the chief like changes like the vacation policy or something, then that would have to go under a 30-day review period. So that, I guess that's my question of like, can we focus it? And if so, what are we focusing it to?
I think something like the vacation policy would probably be subject to the collective bargaining agreement. So I don't know if that's the type of thing that would be subject to this.
Interesting. Okay, so what is a policy that would not be subject to the collective bargaining agreement?
I think the one that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Like use of force.
No,
Well, the LGBTQ.
Oh, like the LGBT. Got it. Okay, got it. I understand. I'm making the connections now. I'm making the connection. Okay. Okay. Next, develop a police officer mental health program that includes officer counseling with teletherapy option and an early intervention program. So my question, there's a series of recommendations.
Can you just tell us like where you're reading that or where you are?
So what I did, I'm sorry. So what if you search for any one of these words, like intervention or something, you'll be able to find it. So what I did is I took all of the policies, I made an Excel spreadsheet, and I put like, I accept the recommendation as is with amendments in consideration, and so I sorted it by the ones I just have questions about. So sorry.
I believe that's an internal operations.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yes, internal operations and practices. Yep.
Okay.
I'll include the section as well.
Here, I'll share the screen.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that before, if someone can share their screen so we know
Well,
what part of the draft.
the host is disabled screen sharing, so I can't.
Oh, there you go.
Remember, I'm not hosting this meeting.
No.
Who's the host?
It should be like page 52, 53 in the report for the full recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I have the Microsoft Word here as well, so I can tell you the page numbers.
I mean, if you're the host, Omar, you can maybe share your screen, or.
Am I the host? It doesn't look like I can share my screen. I got the same message that Richard got. This role comes with many fewer perks than you'd think. This isn't one of them.
I've got it on page 48 and 40. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Ian's right. Early 50s.
Okay.
Police officer mental health 51, 52.
Okay.
There is no host. There you go. Thank you, Jennifer. So my question is, whether like how is this different from what we already have, and yeah, how's this different from what we already have?
Well, I think it would be like the other recommendation we discussed. It's talking about the importance of it for the officers and making a statement within this report that we're supporting officers' mental health. And that some of these programs might be strengthened, like the early intervention program that's actually using indicators like absence from work and other issues to have an intervention policy. things like that, using Blue Team with IA Pro to be able to identify issues with police officers. Remember earlier we had the subcommittee had suggested some requirements, so this has been softened to be more suggestive. I think the teletherapy is definitely no.
Got it.
Also, if I briefly remember, I was on this committee. The telehealth option was just giving officers another option that they could do on their own time. They don't have to walk into someone's office where someone might see them locally. It was trying to give them more privacy and give them more options.
Right.
I think another thing that's really important to consider, or just to think about this, is a lot of the things that are already done by chief in practice may not really be in policy. And if, anytime down the line, there's things that might change, leadership might change and everything, we want to make sure these policies stand, right? And then they are policies at that point and no longer in practice. So it's just kind of giving a name and things to a lot of things that is already being done. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Next, develop a cadre of officers who have received crisis intervention training. I have questions about two parts of this. What is a cadre? Not how do you define it, but like how do you, is it are 3 officers, 10 officers? Like what is a cadre? And if it doesn't matter, then that's fine as well. And then second is the crisis intervention training specifically. Is this a one-time thing? Is this ongoing? Why would this be different from other kinds of training that the department does? Those are the two questions.
First of all, CIT training, crisis intervention training, is a specific 40-hour training course that it has refresher elements to it. I don't believe anybody has the full 40 hours in the police department right now. That's not to say that they don't have training in handling crisis situations, but the CIT training they don't have. So cadre is probably a pretty loose word. We've recommended that ultimately everybody should have CIT training, but at least one person per shift to start out.
Can I just, and John, because I think we worked on this together, right, with the policy, the training and hiring subcommittee. So if I get anything wrong, please correct me. But the idea, Omar, was that, we know that we can't have all of the officers do a 40-hour training like this year, for example, or next year, or, just the 40 hours is a long training. And so the idea was to, use that word, but I was using like cohort word, to make sure that in a time span of, for example, 5 years, all of our officers have at least, one of the trainings, right? So could have like because the CIT training is not like a every year 40-hour training, right? So whenever a first group would do the 40 hours, and then whenever they have to do it again, like in 3 years, they are trained. The second year is trained, and the third year of the group is trained. And so potentially in 5 years, we have everyone CIT trained. We have everyone implicit bias trained, LGBTQ+, like all of the trainings that are being recommended, like to not just do it within 1 year, because it's not feasible within the hours of the trainings that they would be.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Maite. That is helpful. Chief, what are your thoughts on crisis intervention training?
We're good with it. It's a matter of fitting everything into the calendar. There's a lot of requests in this thing. It's so one of the things that we were already working on implementing, which will probably change over, because if this report changes what our requirements are, we'll have to give up other things. But the Police Executive Research Forum has another version of crisis intervention that we had intended on utilizing. But I suppose at this point, we've really put everything on hold to wait and see what we'll be required to do in a few weeks. I don't like anything that gives you one person per squad, because squads change, vacations happen, and inevitably what happens is that we'll be back at this table saying, how come that person wasn't at work? And we'll say, because they get 2 weeks vacation every year. So that's not a good excuse for why we're not capable of dealing with someone in crisis. And I think the most overlooked part of this whole thing is that there's no one that will come out and handle these calls. So we've had crisis a number of times over the last couple of weeks. We've called the crisis team and the response was, I'd love to be a fly on the wall, which is a tremendous response when you have somebody who's trying to harm themselves or armed with a shotgun or all those things. Thankfully, we've brought all those calls to service to a conclusion safely with no arrest and no harm, no use of tasers, no use of any weapons whatsoever, no damage to officers or the person that's being taken for medical treatment. The officers do a really great job of that stuff. I mean, it's really impressive to see what they can accomplish with very little resources. We love more resources. We would love to see the county step in and really do their part in this and something that we could supplement. We are too small to create a real formal mechanism to deal with mental health as mental health professionals. But this is a great way to supplement that. It's just a matter of finding, a lot of what's in the report is like sort of ballparking it, saying like, well, we'll go to a program. Once this is done, we're gonna have to figure out what that program is. And we're gonna find out where it's offered and when it's offered and how we can get people through it. I think that my suggestion of spreading it out over 5 years is okay.
I was gonna ask, what are your thoughts
well,
on that? I mean,
with all due respect, I don't have a nicer way to say this other than that it's a little bit short-sighted, and I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that it's only looking at 5 years, and from our perspective, we need to look at this over 20 years. So if we accomplish this over 5 years, are we starting all over again 5 years from now? So I don't want to do it over a course of 5 years. I want things we can do in 2 years so that we can figure out what's going on in the 2 years after that, and the 2 years after that, and the 2 years after that. We won't be able.
I'm sorry, what did you mean about the 20 years then? That confused me.
So if you look at something over the course of 5 years, the plan that you have laid out, there's not really a sustainable version of that afterwards. We're just getting people through something one time. I want something that's going to hit over and over and over again, because what I know is if you read everybody else's reports, one of the things they highlighted that wasn't mentioned here is that a lot of the most important training that we go through happens once in the academy and never again. More for other departments than ours, because we've really managed to sort of target our training towards the things that we think are most important. So like we were doing simunitions long before a lot of other places would do that, which is like a force on force live action role playing. Things like that are absolutely crucial to being proficient with all your tools. And the reality is it's what prevents people from using shots instead of teaching you how to do it. So I think that 5 years is too long to implement something. And it's also, by the time we get through that 5 years, the way it's drawn out, the way I read it, it kind of assumes that that's it and we're done. I need something that's more like 2 years and then we're starting back over and putting everybody back through it again, because it needs to be, if we're really serious about this, it needs to be a more focused effort towards these types of things. I do think that the list is incredibly ambitious. I think some of the things that are on there, we can afford to send some people to. I think we have to decide what the most important things are, get everybody through it, take some of the other things. And some of the things that are on there that are listing as 40 hours, I think some of those can be done in 8 hours and do them sustaining. So in other words, like when we talk about things like implicit bias training, there's no need for that to be a 40-hour course when you can do 8 hours every single year and keep putting people through it. Look, if I could put people for 2 weeks in a course like that, that's great. But realistically, we've got, time is a fixed commodity, because Omar's going to shut me down in a minute. So I think that's the relevant point there. So,
so I just have a question about that. And so is it realistic that everyone will be able to do an 8-hour training, like the whole department? Just wondering, I don't know.
Absolutely. So typically what we do is we usually have like all of our 40-hour, all of our things that fit into the first 40 hours is typically like our annual training that's pre-booked. And then we try to pick a big evolution every year. So whether that's active shooter, implicit bias, whatever it is, like we have a big evolution every year. So we tailor our big evolution to whatever it is that we want to do to make it happen. It's easy to go through one. Maybe we could squeeze out 2 8-hour courses for the whole department in a given year. 40 hours is more of a specialized type thing. That's a lot of hours in addition, because you can't give up the other 40 hours that we do and swap it out for this 40 hours. It's only in addition. The other things are state mandated. So 8 hours, we can certainly squeeze 1 or 2 a year in, but I'd like to see something where they go more often, because the things we're seeing from Yale Law School is the study that implicit bias loses its effect. And I'll tell you, anecdotally, I agree. From the things I see, because we've been 3 years, I think, since implicit bias, and or maybe 4 now, 2021. We're scheduled to go through it again now. It was a hot topic for a year or two, and then it fizzles and people don't talk about it as much. And when they stop talking about the course, that's where your benefit has stopped. It's got to be at the forefront of people's minds. So I think that the point I'm getting at is that whatever training plan gets put in place, I think it's got to be shorter than 5 years, and that may require courses to be either less people go to a 40-hour course or more people go to an 8-hour course, but we have to find out what those courses are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did mention last night, and I mentioned to Richard today to add there are shorter courses as well in terms of like LGBT training that you can do like in half a day.
So I'm probably not supposed to tell you this yet, but I was on the phone this afternoon with the president of GOAL, is the Gay Officers Action League in New York City, and
Mhm.
they have a they're more than 1,000, and they've got a program they're looking to put on, and I know that a couple of other departments had reached out a while back to them about getting it at the police academy as something offered to all of Westchester County. So I spoke to him and said that whatever we need to do, that we'll sponsor it if nobody else will, we'll host it. So, you know, one of the things that I've been talking about when we've been talking about recruiting over the last couple of days is there's certainly a need to address certain things within our community. Certain other things are a greater benefit if everybody does them, because if we really want to change policing, some things we can change only here. Some things have to be a more broad view. So I think when we talk about trainings like the LGBTQ training that we can do with GOAL, that may be better suited to host the police academy, where they offer it over the course of like a couple of weeks, where everybody can send a few officers at a time and we get our whole departments through. If we can get their whole county through it, that'd be awesome. So that's a little bit different, but similar concept.
Amazing. I have four more. I'm trying to go as quick as possible. This last piece was super helpful. Next, under governance, oversight, and transparency, specify that investigation of complaints will begin within 10 business days of the complaint being filed and will complete within 30 days of being filed unless OPD submits a justification for the delay in writing. I'd love to get some clarity around what the current deadlines are for these steps, and then like what happens if these deadlines are missed.
So there's they're supposed to be investigating right away. I know that there was a complaint that got set aside, and I don't know why, and that's my oversight to allow that to happen. I'm sorry?
I think that one came around the holiday season.
It doesn't matter. We're here 365. There's no excuse for a complaint to be delayed. It should be investigated immediately in every case. The only issue I think with this one is I think that there shouldn't be an end point on an investigation. Any good investigation, if the facts lead it to have to keep going, sometimes investigations have to go on. I think that if there's if the CCRB has reason to question why an investigation took so long, you know, they should have some authority to ask why. They've always got access to me if the board permits them to ask questions like that. I don't go to CCRB meetings, so I can't answer that, but that's always a fair question that they can ask of the board, or the board can ask of me, or however that shakes out. I just think it's a bad practice to put an end date. I have no problem with saying that absolutely I agree that investigations should commence immediately, you know, within reasonable time, that the investigator is off on the weekend or something like that would really be the only exception. I just don't think there should be end dates on investigations, because that forces you to make a conclusion based on a calendar rather than the facts of the case.
Well, I think that's why we included the justification piece, because we don't want an investigation to be cut short if it really just is complex, but we want to know what the situation is.
Got it.
That's not uncommon in a lot of departments to have where they have a target like that to report back if that target's not going to be reached and why.
Okay, gracias. Next, the police department, this is under hiring and training. The police department should develop a multi-year training plan that includes greater emphasis on anti-racism in policing, de-escalation, procedural justice, added cultural competency, and handling protests. So we touched on this already a little bit, but my big question is how training is already structured. So the chief actually illuminated this. There's a certain amount of training that needs to happen that is kind of pre-baked already. And then there's space on top of that for some additional training. What I'm trying to get a sense of is how these specific recommendations jive with the way that you are kind of structuring training as it is.
I mean, I think it adds a lot of topics that people want to see us touch on. We touch on them probably in different ways than maybe what this report contemplates. Again, it's the one complication is that it talks about a lot of theories, And then we have to find courses that fit into those theories. And then we have to make sure those courses are available at a time. So, you know, I mean, conducting a long-term training plan, you know, typically we try to plan things 2 years out, just to know, like, especially when we talk about our large scale things. So we're always planning like what's next year's big evolution. And typically we've got something queued up for the year after that, but things change. 2 years ago, what we were talking about doing is not the same as what we're talking about right now in terms of what top priorities are. So I think that everything's always just got to remain flexible. But I have no problem with sharing with people what a plan is in terms of topics. I think the issue here is that that's a lengthy list of material. And when we first discussed it, there was an expectation that a lot of those courses were longer. And I think that maybe some of the people on this group have now realized, you know, to what extent time really is a fixed commodity. So the short answer is I love all those topics and we should do all of them every day. It's a matter of how much we can fit in the calendar and then finding courses that fit some of those things.
Okay.
Some of those things we can teach in-house. That makes things very easy. And sometimes you can factor two things together. Like if we spend a day on use of force and we make it about crowd control, that's easy, 2 birds with 1 stone. If we need one of those courses, if we need to bring in an outside instructor, there's either expenses for the instructor and then that creates scheduling issues where it becomes a big overtime issue. So it's probably a too complex question to answer right here and right now, but the short answer is sure.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add, right? Like, I think this is a great opportunity for what you said before, Chief, right? Like ask you what really happens, right? So, well, not what really happens, but when or how can myself or the community or this working committee really work on this plan with you, or even just to look at like what is realistic in 2 years, what's not realistic. Like, of course, I'm making these recommendations, but I don't know what's realistic. And like Christina said before, I don't think we've had the opportunity to be this amicable and talk about these things like, you know, how we should have.
So again, short answer, I don't know. A lot of what I'm sitting here with right now, I've not come here with a lot of plans because I'm subject to whatever the Board of Trustees decides at the end of this. So I'm not making a lot of fixed plans for the rest of 2021 because whatever they are, they're going to get tossed in the air in a couple of minutes anyway. So the short answer right now, I don't know. Once we find out what will be required to do based on these recommendations, then I have to start researching what courses are available, where they're available, who teaches them, how much they cost. And then we've got to look through schedules. We've got to factor in there that we've got 4 openings right now. So we're shorthanded. So we don't have extra staffing in any squad right now. All those things make complicated sending people off to schools in the short term. And then there's a long-term plan. So to what extent would you have the ability to work with us on that? I don't know. I think it's just got to be figured out as we go in terms of what the relationships will become after this is over.
Got it. Okay. I would say that as one person on the board, I'm one of 5. I just have 1 vote, but my understanding of the way that this will move forward is we have this kind of this plan that we will submit to the governor, and it is a guiding document. But it is not legislation, right? Nor is it kind of prescriptive. What it is the fruit of the labor that we have gone through over the course of the last few months to understand what are the community's intentions, desires, wishes, and the community involves law enforcement in terms of what are you looking for, and now it's about the art of the possible. What's reasonable, what's feasible, with this as a North Star, recognizing that these are the kind of things that we want. Okay, super quick. The police department, this is under policies and procedures, should develop a duty to intervene policy to require reporting misconduct by department personnel. This goes back to one of the questions I had early on.
Omar, I'll fix this one quick for you. It's just an extension of the policy we have, and it's a separate policy so that it makes it more specific. It's easy.
Okay, great. Thank you. And last, almost last, CPCRB members, this is under governance, oversight, and transparency, should be required to recuse themselves from a vote if there's a conflict of interest, such as being related. So this was actually one of the ones that was removed from a recommendation from the January 27th. I'd love to get some context there.
That's because it's already in the code.
It is already.
Yeah, that one should
Yeah.
have been removed. It was a missed edit.
Got it. Okay, brilliant. The last piece, I want to very quickly say what are the ones that for me are I know at this point. There's very few, but they are number one. There are two recommendations with respect to ICE. One is clarify what the policy is and what the approach is to the community. And the second one is that the department should modify its general orders so that it does not respond to ICE unless they are called to the location. After last night's meeting, my understanding is that the benefits of continuing the policy plus with the communication to the community would be a net benefit to the community, as opposed to the moving forward with modifying the orders. Even if we communicate that, it would be net worse. That is my understanding. Comments there, questions there?
Yeah, I still I see that what you mean, and I see what Chief means as well. I still don't believe that in its entirety. I still believe that the police would be most greatly negatively affected by just having the presence there, because people will relate them to ICE and so yeah, so I still have that feeling.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Mark, let me clarify one thing on the clarification. So
Yeah.
one of the two suggested recommendations here you mentioned was to clarify the policy. It's really whatever that policy is, it needs to be communicated better with
Yes.
the public.
Thank you, Richard. Stated much more specifically and eloquently than I did. So thank you. The others are consider an outside investigator to review complaint cases. My understanding is that if there was a situation where the CPCRB, and this is under governance, oversight, and transparency, if the situation where the CPCRB wanted to get additional investigation outside, because as I understand what happens is an incident happens, there's a complaint, it goes to the chief of the CPCRB, they give it to the investigator internally at the OPD. The investigator investigates, and then that investigation goes to the CPCRB. The CPCRB makes a determination. If the CPCRB says that we need more investigation, then the chief is the one who investigates. And then after that, there's a determination made. And so I guess the situation here would be if there was a situation where so Jennifer, maybe you can clarify, is it the outside investigator instead of the chief, or is it the outside investigator instead of the OPD investigator originally? What role would they be playing?
So it would be alongside the OPD investigator. So it's kind of a two-part thing. Number one, when people are the complainants, it can be a little bit intimidating to have an OPD officer responding to the fact that you made a complaint against an OPD officer. And then secondly, it's again, that trust issue that we saw from the survey and heard from the community. People don't trust the process. I think that builds a little bit more trust in the fact that what's happening, that the complaint is going to be reviewed fairly.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's a helpful clarification. And then the last group of them are all related to the creation of the new commission. And I spoke a little bit with Jennifer about this. My general feelings are, at this point, we have the 5 trustees who serve as the police commissioners. It's one of the responsibilities that we have that we could probably do more as police commissioners. And one of the projects we've had early on this year and late last year was clarifying what does it mean to be a police commissioner, because it's not always super clear. But I didn't see what problem the creation of this new board would be solving. I would love to hear from you. What problem is this solving?
Just more that there's a more focused oversight on the department, because all of you are part-time and this is part of your responsibilities. So it means that there's very little time that you're able to devote to it, even if you are trying to put more of a focus on it. And that's going to change from board to board. This way, there's a group that has that as their sole responsibility. So that's really what we were going for there.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful.
I also think, I just want to, jump in real quick. I think everyone last night is in favor of more community policing, and in favor of collaborative community policing.
Yeah.
And one area that this committee could improve on is coming up with different ways to do that with stakeholders in the community, whether it be town halls or block parties or informative sessions, whatever. But that would be a positive going forward with a new committee.
And if I remember correctly, either from Richard or Ian's research, there are a few different municipalities that are enacting this as a way to bring that forward, et cetera, as well.
That's great.
I think Ian said LA. Is that right, Ian? Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted.
I was unmuted and I muted myself. Yeah, they have one that dates back to I think like the mid 90s, and then it was strengthened early 2000s. Yeah, San Francisco would be another one, but communities of all sizes.
Yeah, but Jennifer said it best. It's a matter of focus. So you have a governing body like the Board of Trustees, and you're multi-focused. You've got a lot of responsibilities on a part-time governance responsibility, and this is a way of providing some full-time focus for one of the most important services that the village provides.
Yeah, and I will say this one wasn't my idea, but one of the reasons that I was supportive of it is that I spoke with Mayor Garrity sometime last year. It was a blur. But I remember that she mentioned that she didn't even realize the full scope of her responsibility as mayor and as a police commissioner until pretty recently. And, she served kind of a lot of terms and she was a trustee before that. So it's something that I don't think we want the board to lose focus of. So this is kind of a way to mitigate that, to ensure that there's always some group that's really, really focused on it. But that was one of the reasons that we included trustees in it, because we don't want the Board of Trustees to be entirely out of the loop on it.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing it does is it provides a mechanism for many of the other recommendations that are made in the report, such as policy reviews or the role of the police department in schools, et cetera. It provides a focused way of discussing these things in the future.
Okay, thank you. I need to take a bio break before the next meeting, which is not going to be a short one, never is. Thank you. I think that one topic we did not get to is what happens after this. And we can start an email chain and talk about like whether having another meeting makes sense or something like that. At this point, fewer and fewer people come to these meetings, and so I also wanted to be representative of the 18 folks thoughts. But the idea that the mayor had, which I thought was a good one, was getting some number of people. It could be some people that are already on the working committee, including some new people. There's been a lot of commentary about what those people should look like. Get some of those folks in there and get together once a year for the next 3 years in November before the budget. And the idea is we can get together and talk about the progress made with respect to this plan, and those recommendations can then flow into the budget talks that happen right after. So I thought that was an interesting idea, and we can talk about it over email. I really appreciate you all. This has been extremely helpful. I'm sorry for having taken over the whole meeting, Richard. I hope this isn't taking everything off. And I'll see you all in like 8 minutes who are going. Thank you.
Okay. Bye,
Thank
Omar.
you.
Okay, well, that was a good discussion. So I guess this is the opportunity to talk about the changes that we've made in the report based on the version that several of you contributed to together or individually, and other comments that we have. So anything, I think overall, on speaking specifically about the version of the report that was discussed last night, that 8 of you reviewed and came up with, I think with the exception of the qualified immunity suggested recommendation, we pretty much just accepted the changes that you recommended. I think we wordsmithed a couple of them, like the SRO issue. Do you think that we faithfully got the gist of what you were doing, plus the conversation we had a few days ago on the qualified immunity?
So I'll say I have been very swamped with work and I haven't fully reviewed it yet. I'm still in the narrative section of it. I did see, because you ended up sending the SRO one separately. I remember seeing that in my email. I don't remember noticing anything that I thought was misrepresented.
Okay. Well, the important one was the change that was based on the conversation we had the other day on the indemnification and the police officers. So take a look at that one when you get a chance to take a look at it.
I sent my notes to Richard and
Right.
Ian, but so the group knows, some of my notes consisted of specifying specifically if there is a committee going forward, specifying that there needs to be more Black men on that committee, as well as people of color in that committee, because if it's not specified, it can have the village can go their own way with how they want to decide. So I added that as a suggestion, and feel free to jump in and say if you want it, don't want it. I also just clarified, just to be consistent, and say LGBTQ plus, because I do this all the time where like I say LGBTQ and then sometimes I say plus. And the only other thing I added, the SRO thing was taken out and then was put back in. That was just like it didn't appear on my draft. And I added a short LGBTQ plus training more frequently, instead of like part of this one big 40-hour training that doesn't happen that often. So those were my edits that I sent to Richard and Ian. So let me know your thoughts on it.
Oh, speaking for Richard and Ian, those were good edits. So we're going to incorporate them.
Yeah. They were good.
I think the other thing that was implicit in what you were saying was that, and this I think gets back to the conversation we had earlier relating to the policy changes, is that consult your local resources if it's things on cultural and other kinds of competencies that are needed to be engaged with the community appropriately, and that's an important part of this, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a formal 8-hour or 40-hour training exercise. It can be the liaisons that we're talking about, and being mindful of a change that affects the community overall, or some part of the community, to involve them in at least the acknowledgement of that change, if not input. So I see the chief's not on this right now, but
No. I guess he had to go to that meeting as well.
yeah, I did.
Oh.
So I see you're putting on some things about the indemnification, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just added it into the chat if people hadn't looked at it yet.
Okay, thanks.
There's a typo actually, I just realized, where it says to eliminate civil liability as a defense. It should be eliminate qualified immunity as a defense in civil lawsuits.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So the other thing to focus on is the part that we added in the introduction that describe a suggested process of implementation from April the 1st that I think the board would have to take action on as part of this. It's an overarching recommendation that builds upon what Christine and others have said here, that whether it's that at a minimum, it should be an expanded working committee, if not a completely different committee, and that's up to them to provide some oversight to the implementation process for whatever it is that the board accepts for implementation. And that there was a process described there where reports would come from the police department on a quarterly basis and reviewed with this committee for the recommendations, each of which has a timeline associated with it. Some of them immediate as interpreted by 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. Others a process that can take a year or two and requires interface with some other entity like the county, like on the mental health response issue. So I think that's as an important one as others. And that is something that didn't arise from the subcommittees or the committee overall, even though we all talked around it. But we just need to make sure that you're comfortable with that process before we finalize that. So it's in the first few pages of the report, immediately before the list of recommendations. So any input we get now, so remember that we've got to get this to the board by close of business on Friday. So we have tomorrow and Friday morning to make corrections. So I guess if there are other suggested edits you want to get to us, if they're minor, we can do that at any time up to the point at which submit it. But if there are major things that we need to think about, it kind of has to be tomorrow.
The part that you're talking about with the implementation, is that this part in red under summary of recommendations?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought I had accidentally, sorry. I thought I had accidentally opened Gabby's copy because she mentioned that she had made edits in red. And I was like, oh, she added this section. No, I think this is good. I do like that you mentioned in this that we would be meeting monthly, or the committee, I don't even know if I want to be on it, but that the committee would meet monthly, because like the one, at the very least, once a year frightened me. When Trustee Lopez mentioned that, I think that's not frequent enough.
No.
Agree.
That stuck out.
Yeah. At a minimum quarterly, but I think monthly is probably better, even if the meeting isn't, even if it's a half-hour meeting, just to say, here's where we are, here's what we're doing next. I think we want to make sure that this is continuing, and we're not going to be able to do that if we're meeting once a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, to me, that there would be a frequent meeting cycle, certainly in the first year. Monthly probably makes a lot of sense, and then maybe quarterly thereafter. But I mean, many of these are recommendations. I mean, the training one, for example, I mean, this is something that the plan will take 5 years. And if the village doesn't accept the recommendation about the police commission, this becomes a sort of more general police department oversight mechanism in the absence of something like that. That's something to discuss.
Yeah.
And I also
Yeah.
think this
Oh,
committee.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to go? I
Yeah,
also
yeah,
think
go
this
ahead.
committee could help with outreach to the community. I think when we keep discussing ICE, there's a misconception here. My perception being we were supposed to understand what the role was when there was no clear role. If there is a clearly defined role, if the village decides to go forward with that, then maybe this committee could help do outreach to the public with the police about this. Hold Spanish language virtual meetings or in person, when things are safer, town halls about it. So again, like not just doing pizza nights, but doing real informative outreach. And that's something I would love to see. Again, I don't have to be on it, it's fine, but I would love to see that part of a new committee going forward being collaborative with outreach. So implementing the policy and then also bringing that policy to the public to create trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's like big dream thinking, but
And for me, sometimes I have, in all transparency, a little bit of difficulty with that, because I feel that this kind of collaborative effort turns into them relying solely on the community to take that brunt of everything, and then they don't keep their end of the deal, kind of thing, or their end of the toil and everything.
Mhm.
And I find that problematic, and I feel that happens a lot. So yeah, just, my 2 cents.
If I can shift gears there a little bit here, because John's in the meeting, there was something specific discussion we had at the beginning of the meeting relating to a suggested recommendation on policies relating to the duty to intervene versus the duty to report. And so you are probably the person in this meeting, Jennifer, also, who knows the policies the best. So is there a duty to report or not? Because the chief maintained that there was.
I saw that in the use of force section, not as standalone. So if they observed excessive force, they were required to report it. And that was also a duty to intervene. It was in the use of force policy. However, what I think the committee was talking about, and Maite, correct me if I'm wrong, was they wanted a duty to report any type of thing that would be out of policy. So
including like an administrative
you saw an officer taking a bribe, or you saw some other kind of violation that you
verbal abuse, physical abuse, any type of abuse.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a duty to report excessive force that's in that policy. I don't recall off the top of my head how exactly it says it, but I did see that in the policy along with the duty to intervene. But I didn't see it as a standalone for all policies.
Okay. Well, then we can make that clear in the revisions to the report that we're talking about the full range of things, including administrative violations and rudeness and things like that.
Yeah, I think for as soon as everything happened with George Floyd, Chief, did mention that they were signing on and they were following everything and they can't wait, which the duty to intervene is part of that. But then I think what was found was that it wasn't exactly a standalone or anything. It was just kind of spoken to or referred to in another policy, but it wasn't a standalone thing, and that perhaps it should be a little bit more explicit the way it's described and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Please, any other suggestions?
I feel like we haven't talked much, or we haven't heard much from the trustees about the liaison The liaisons that we were talking about putting together. I think Kendall, was that you? I feel like I've heard you talk about it a lot.
Yeah, about liaisons concerning the community policing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that was basically an idea to have segments of the community come together with the police department, with one liaison from the police department, on a somewhat of a regular basis, and basically to instill or make sure that the community policing concept is adhered to properly. And through that, I think that there can be a lot learned about how to apply it to the community. So that was my idea and that recommendation.
Yeah.
You know, you would basically to have different segments of the community come together in a 3-person segments with one liaison, one officer liaison, one police liaison to each 3 parties.
I think the idea behind this, as well as, and Christina had some thoughts on this too, as well as some of your thoughts about creative engagement to the community, not just events, but in just regular walks of life, is that community policing isn't just hot dogs and going.
Right, exactly.
It's not, it's how you engage with people on a human level. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the community looks at in terms of what Ossining has done. They put together a block party that they had down in the community each year, and that seemed to be it in terms of outreach, you know, for the Black community, and that kind of sticks out. There's not much else, and it really needs to be, you know, community policing involves so much more, and really attaches itself to a lot of what's going on in those areas. So it really needs to be re-examined and applied properly.
Yeah, you're right, Jennifer. They didn't discuss it specifically in the 2 meetings we've had. I think it's one of the easier things that the police department could implement. And then what we're essentially saying is that everybody has a collateral responsibility to pick a community group, and you're going to be the liaison with it.
Yeah, well, and the thing that I was thinking about is that those folks could work with like whatever implementation committee exists.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as those people are in place and those officer liaisons are in place with them, they can start working together with the implementation committee, and then we have more community input in the whole process.
Yeah.
We could also do, you know, and I've seen a lot of success with LGBTQ plus liaisons in Westchester. Obviously, it's going to be harder to do because you can't just like ask someone in a job interview your sexual orientation or your gender identity, but it goes in a bigger picture of diversifying your force. But also you end up saving costs because you could pay for just the liaison police officer to get the certain training, and then they could internally train their officers about this, as well as making it easier. Again, like if there was a liaison officer regarding this transgender policy, I may have felt more comfortable reaching out to them first instead of just like going to the police station and knocking on the door and saying, hey, I'd like to see your policy, as if, you know, that would be taken so seriously. So I think it makes outreach easier, and it also helps internally train officers. It's a win-win. I mean,
I think reaching that point where you have a 3-group committee and a liaison is going to be one of the issues. How do you vet these people? I mean, because they didn't do such a good job with this. So, you know, how do you make sure that you have, or we want to make sure that we have the right representation from each part of the community? So, you know, that's going to be something that has to be paid attention to.
So Kendall, when we speak about the community liaison, do you think there's some more language or evidence or anything kind of needed around it in order to kind of hammer that message home?
In terms, another language in terms of
Just more evidence, I guess, more substantial, so that it's you know, like Richard said, this is probably one of those like low hanging fruit that they're going to be like, oh yeah, we're doing this, and look
Right,
at what
right.
we've done, right? But then, so is there a room or a conversation? I know we might not have a lot of space to do this anymore, but something where you might want to add something so it doesn't become that, right? That
Yeah,
low-hanging
yeah. I'll take a look at it and try to make it more direct. I think I can do that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Might just be a good idea after this meeting just to send an email to the whole committee just saying, please have your edits in by whatever.
Yeah, especially since we
Yeah.
have everybody here. So I'll do that as soon as we're off. I'll get an email to everybody. And I'll be clear about tomorrow. I think end of the day tomorrow would be fine. Because we'll start making the changes that we know about, and I reserve Friday morning to complete that. So
I just remembered one that kind of came up last night, and I've heard the mayor talk about it a few times. The recommendation that she wanted to add about the academy doing adding some of these trainings, or encouraging them to add some of those trainings. Has that been added? I can write up a thing for it in my, okay. I can add something for that, because I think that's a good thing to do in addition, but I want to make sure that it says in addition to the trainings that we're asking the OPD to do.
Right, because it's a Westchester County. We're urging Westchester County to incorporate some different elements to their academy training.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike in-service training, which the village and the department have control over, you only can influence the county and their academy.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Anything else? All right, well, we're getting, it's not the finish line. We're getting close to a line.
Yeah.
There's a long way to go, but you guys have been really great to work with. You put in a lot of work. I mean, a lot of times these committees, they sort of fizzle out, and I realize we don't have everybody on this call, but the amount of work just shows the concern and your commitment to having better policing in the community, and it's helped us a lot. So thank you. I really do thank you. I know John and Ian feel the same, and Marika as well.
I do want to say, Richard, Ian, and John, that if at any point, if like I was attacking you or being conflicted or anything against you, I apologize for that. I really might have just been attacking the wrong person, taking out my feelings on the wrong people, and I apologize for that because I was very frustrated by this process.
So I appreciate that, but remember, we're consultants. The bar for offensiveness is really high for us.
I'll try harder next time then.
And from my perspective, we all accomplished a lot. You all had a lot of input, and you look at some of the other communities who put these together. They started in May and June, and this really kicked off in December. I mean, I was looking at the timeline. We've looked at what other communities have come up with, and they spent a lot of time on it. And this was really compacted. And I think the amount of effort you all put into it, and the way we put this report together, there was a lot into it in such a short time frame. So, but I also get the frustration, even with who all got selected to be participants on the working group. That a lot of that was laid before we were here, but we've learned in this process as well. And it's been great to work with you all Because I've learned as we've gone through this and hearing, different voices and inputs into this process has been really gratifying to me.
Thank you, John.
That's fine.
I like to say I really appreciate the guidance and the work that you put in as Matrix. I think through it all, we all had our different ideas about how to approach this. I walked into this process probably was one of the later people to come in, so I had to do a lot of catch up, and you certainly helped in that area in terms of helping me to get on the right page in the process. So I really appreciate your work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah, thank you for working with us, and yeah, you were always really quick to respond if I had any suggestions or ideas or questions, and that was really appreciated, as well as my opinion, just having a non-biased member, in terms of you don't have a relationship to the village and you don't have a relationship to the police, and I think that was really important here, because as we see, things get political and things get, I feel like it's hard once you have those relationships set in place. So it was great to have that extra person there.
For sure.
Yeah, great. So if any of you need to contact us tomorrow, you've got certainly my email address. Do you have my cell phone number?
I think, yeah, I do.
Well, here, let me give it to all of you in case you don't. It's 650-823-3174.
Can you say it one more time? I'm sorry, I'm having
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. 650-823-3174. Operators are standing by.
So in terms of next steps, like questions of next steps, so Friday you will submit the final draft, and then the village will vote. Is this our final working committee meeting technically? Is this it, or?
I think that's up to you. If you want to, we can meet again. So here's the other process. So when they meet on the 10th, next Wednesday, that's a study session for them. So they're not going to take action on it. It's going to be like the meeting we had on February the 6th, or I think whenever it was, that they're going to discuss this report. And then they meet a week later on the 17th, hopefully, although they have the option of the 24th, to take action on it in a legislative meeting.
And they can
So
also, there's public input on the 17th.
Right.
Go and speak about the process, speak about their feelings. They can vote. They don't. It's not a yes or no vote. I vote yes on this document or no on this document. They're going to vote yes or no on the recommendations they decide they want to put forward.
Right.
They don't have to on the 17th, as Richard said. It could be the 24th, but it actually could be, if they call a special session, I believe they can do that any date before the 1st.
Right.
My feeling is that probably it's going to happen on the 17th. That's just my feeling, but that seems like what's going to happen, but maybe not. So I don't, at this point, I don't know. I feel like we should start directing any of our time and efforts into meeting with the village instead of just the working committee at this point, because it's going to be in their hands. So if it is another special session, I think if we want to keep this conversation going, it should be with the village. That's just my take.
That's a good point, because they're the ones who are going to make the change happen now. So both as the working committee, because you have been involved in this process from the beginning, but also encouraging the community to provide input to the board directly on the meeting on the 17th or by email, etc. It would be good to convert your roles after we get this report in to an advocacy role.
and do that as soon as possible, because you know the 17th is not the time usually in public input where they go, you know what, Christina just made an amazing point, I'm changing my mind. So please encourage, you know, once this report is out on Friday, please encourage all of your friends and colleagues and family members to read it, to ask questions, so that we can, you know, push what we want forward. And we're going to get a chance to really hear what the board feels like, you know, what their thoughts are on the 10th. So now we got to do the advocacy work.
Yeah.
If we want, because I know it's gonna, you know, this is like hour 10 or something of Zooms this week for this, but.
Yeah. I did have a question about that Friday deadline. Is there like a time by which you have to get it to the board on Friday? Would we get a chance to see it just before you send it off?
Cliff is fine.
What we could do is, how about this? I'm going to start making all the changes that we've talked about up to this point tomorrow. How about we get you an end of the day version of the report, and that way you've got a few hours to get any other comments in. How about that?
Yeah,
So,
that would work. I
so
mean,
what
realistically, I'm not going to see it until the end of the day anyway.
Okay, so what I'll do in that is I'll accept all the changes that we've made up to this point, because I think it's already pretty overwhelming in terms of looking at it as a document. So that any changes I make from this point based on what we've talked about will show as fresh changes. That Ian's my helper on this. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
right? Thank you. I mean, I don't mean you're doing it. I'll be doing it, but I want to make sure that we can do it that way. Okay.
Just make sure you delete the comments then.
Yes, right. Because there are comments in addition to suggested edits.
Yeah, I'm adding some comments too.
Yeah.
When is the end date for Matrix's involvement? I know the village has, I mean, is there a contract involved that says that you're over, or how does that work?
Our contract is ended when they submit their plan to the state.
Okay, so that's April
1st. Yeah.
But the plan that they submit to the state at that point, it won't have matrix letterhead or anything like that, right? It'll be something completely separated from what you all created.
I think that's to be determined, but I think that the likely answer to that is that they will have some sort of summary letter or document that is their acceptance of the board's actions. And to that would be, as an appendix, this working committee report.
Got it. Okay.
To reflect the process that led to what the board would support.
Thank you. As other RFPs go out nationally about this that you guys vie for, is this a plan that you might be using as a look at what we've done, or are you staying away from that?
Well, often prospective clients are interested in work samples.
Is the Ossining one that you'd be proud of to share in terms of ideas and innovation, et cetera?
It's yes, definitely that. But I think what this project represents, it's not a traditional consulting assignment. It's one that we've worked alongside all of you and help bring to fruition your ideas into something. And I think that is a good process, and a lot of communities are trying to have some sort of process like that rather than some external entity like a consultant telling them what to do.
Right.
I think that I just have a recommendation, I guess, for like, you know, if this is something, this type of project that you do in the future with a community, maybe one, I think that you guys have worked with much bigger communities, right? Like Ossining is pretty small. But for myself, I feel like I mean, we're always learning, but I felt like every time I was like, what are we talking about? And then, like I always felt like I was too late, right? Like, like I kept saying today and yesterday, I wish this productive type conversation would have happened way before, so that I would have felt like, I was making more change or something like that. And so in terms of, recommendations for the future, I think in terms of working committee members, or if you work with more like the community, having a little bit of an education aspect to it, right? Like, what is a policy? I didn't know until I was part of this. What kinds of policies should we be looking at? What should we, because I think, like, in terms of myself, like, ICE is a big thing that I am interested in, but I had no idea about anything else until it was, for me, felt a little too late. And so I still feel like, I might read books, and I'm reading like a whole bunch of like policing books, but now I feel like, oh, I should have said this a long time ago, right? Like, I should have thought about this way before. So yeah, I think that a little bit more education for the community would have been, or would be, good for the future.
Yeah,
I think in the real in the real world, we would have been just catching on to this now. I think that the process was in such a small window that a lot of the things that we're becoming aware of now, it would have been wonderful to have that same awareness 2 months ago, but in reality, this process was put into a very small window, and it's only natural that we kind of are opening up now to some things that we just weren't aware of. And I think in that aspect, we accept the accolades, that we got this thing done in this amount of time.
And I also think that we wouldn't be here with the report that we do without Matrix, right? Like, if this hadn't been hired out for consultants, I don't believe that the end product would be this. So I do really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks
For
to both
sure.
of you. I appreciate that.
And also, sometimes I get hard on myself when I'm like, I think I wish I came up with this idea or that, or we are also processing the trauma of policing and over policing in a pandemic, and reading these policies and talking about this stuff over and over and over and over again. And so it's a lot to process right now, especially with, it's also winter. It's like it's just all of it at once. So
Yeah.
I just say, like, you're doing a great job, and it's a lot. It's a lot to take on, which is why I get sometimes really upset when we're here, being honestly dismissed by the chief of police, or people getting snappy in the comments, and because it's a lot, and it's not easy. It's a lot to process, and I just hope that people can understand that, because it's tough stuff.
Yeah, and have the openness, that I think we had a really positive tone in this report that we created, and it's really trying to foster positive change in policing and Ossining, and that was certainly all of your intent and everything that we put together here. And I think that if you look at the wording, it's not accusatory. It's building upon some good things and trying to come up with some new ideas, most of which aren't that controversial.
Yeah. Athena, just to catch you up, after April, we're going to be meeting weekly after April 1st, and you're the chair.
All right. Good night. Bye.
I'm already getting calls every day now for gigs. I mean, this all happened in the middle of me trying to write a lot of music. So, and
This
I
should
mean,
be inspiration, Kenzel. Like, you should have a lot to write about.
if inspiration is this, then I'll go sell insurance. But right now I'm a full-time musician and I haven't had, this has really been a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Christina, I know you feel that.
Yeah, I'm scared to get back out there though. A little hesitant, but we'll see.
I already have gigs lined up.
Whoa, nice.
Yeah.
Kendall, Christina actually put a song out earlier this year or late last year during pandemic, which was fantastic.
Really?
Which I highly recommend.
Well, we have to work together.
Yeah.
Hey, Kendall, I'll be in New York sometime in May or June, so you have to tell me your schedule.
Absolutely. I'll let you know.
Be like a
Let me
band.
know. Let me know.
Right? I said that a few weeks ago.
You what?
Althema said that y'all should put together a band, and I was saying that I said that a few weeks ago.
Right. That'll work.
But Althema, on a serious note, so we, Richard, I think you said by tomorrow COB, you'll be accepting any kind of final edits and you'll be sending that to the group, right?
Thursday evening, yes. And then that gives us Friday morning to consider any additional edits. Because we're required to get this to the village. We're interpreting it by close of business on Friday.
So do you mean like more edits from us or, I guess I'm asking, like, did the police chief or anyone else add anything? Are we going to get to see what they put or would these just be ours?
So the discussion, it would be yours, but the police chief is on the working committee. So he has made no suggested edits to this at any point. In the discussion today, he countered some of the points, the perceived points that were being made in the report. So we had some discussions about policies and the CPCRB suggestions.
Okay.
But nothing concrete that's going to change as a result of that, barring maybe some words around a couple of things like the duty to report issue.
So, Richard, that's a good point that Althema mentioned, though. If I know that you said you might try to send something to us by Friday morning or something, just so that we kind of have a heads up. But would it be possible if there is something that is very different or that we kind of, and we meaning the working committee, everybody, but just something that may have been kind of a really last minute ad, which I don't foresee could happen, but just as something, if you could kind of just highlight it for the working committee, so everyone's aware.
That's a really good point. So we would, I don't, except for the academy issue, I don't think there's anything that's substantially new. So I think we're essentially talking about some fairly minor things to the existing report.
Awesome.
So I guess I just want to be clear. No one else like wanted to add anything, or was there ever a point that like we said something about a policy that we wanted changed and they said they gave, like they rebutted, like are they rebuttaling on the same sheet? I guess I'm just trying to see like, or figure out with the work that they did, do they have something to add?
Only
the chief mentioned, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that only in discussions I've received no written suggested edits from the police chief or the police department. And in this meeting today, we had some discussion about policies that do or do not exist, like the duty to intervene or duty to report.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add, the chief mentioned a memo. I think he sent the Board of Trustees a memo that we have not seen. But I think that's where his comments are coming.
And I think, again, me being conflicted, I also, Omar tried to allude to something today of maybe kind of, do we still want this to be on? Speaking to, since there's two things relating to ICE and due to the conversation yesterday,
if we still want that to be on the plan or if it's something that we should remove or something. So there was that, but I think it's gonna stand from what I've understood.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I think we want that recommendation, whether they vote it down or not.
Exactly.
So I guess I just want to ask, like, Richard, so the report that you're gonna hand in is going to be, I guess what I'm just trying to get is like we put this report, we all work to put this together. Like, what are the memos? Like, what are these things? Like, are these going to be extra add-ons? Like, I guess that's what I'm trying, like, I guess everyone, you worked with the police chief and the police department. Were they writing a report as well, or were they just kind of listening and working with you?
Our contact with the police department was only at the beginning of the process, in which we needed to find out what kind of police department this was, where we needed to collect a lot of data about policies, about programs, about workload and service levels, what people did. And so we had some interviews randomly as well with police officers, also at the same time that we were interviewing people in the community. So after that, our only contact with the police department was with the chief and the other member of the police department who's on the working committee when they came to committee meetings or in subcommittee meetings. That was it.
Okay. And I just wanted to know, because I've read our draft. I don't want to add anything, but if someone else added something from not us, I just wanted to make sure where I could see it or, be able to know.
Yeah, so the edited version, the marked up version of the report we gave you was largely accepting markups of the report that we got from the 8 of you who contributed to that. That was the most extensive set of edits that we received. There was a separate one from Jennifer earlier, a separate one from Rodolfo earlier, and a few emails from Christina and a couple of other civilian members of the board, of the working committee. And then it was interpreting, I guess is the right word, the needs to see certain kind of language that in the report that we got from the public review meetings. So the public review meetings didn't add any suggested recommendation or subtract any. It helped us make the edits to the report we developed so that it was better understood. Does that make sense? So there's no other.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
And yeah, and so Althema, just so to be super clear, the email that you saw, the last report you saw, it's going to look very similar. We discussed some of the wording and the edits that we've sent in, but it's not like, I'm just going to say like Bob Ritchie has an idea and that's going to go into this. The next step then is it going into the village's hands, and that's where they're going to make changes.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be able to, at that point, do their own input. So I think before you jumped on, I think the best thing to do is once this report is live and sent to the board, we can start advocating at a level, getting the community to read it and communicating to the board why this is so important. And then they're going to probably, put their own views on it, but it's...
Okay.
Is this a public input meeting, guys? Just wondering.
It was a noticed meeting that it is open.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jocelyn, for letting us know.
Jocelyn, I just see you posted there. I'll put the link right now to the most recent draft that's up, but that is going to change in about, I would say, 48 hours. The draft that's on our site right now is the very first draft one. Then 8 of us did an extensive edit of that draft. That didn't go live because by the time it was done, we got to the next step of this almost final draft, which was sent to us Tuesday at 3:30 in the morning. Then we did edits. We did a special meeting last night. We talked about a couple of our edits here. So the final recommendations will be sent to the board Friday end of the day. I don't know. I believe they may put it on the website on Monday, but I'm going to give you the site so that you can, if you want to watch any of our meetings that have all been recorded, as well as our public input meetings, you can take a look at that. Let me find it real quick.
Thank you so much. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this site is great that it's all in one site here. I'm going to post it right here.
Thanks, Christina.
One more thing, when they get their final copy of the draft, they're going to be talking about it at their work session on March 10th, next Wednesday. They put an agenda up and they usually have links to things like that that they're looking at. So they will probably have a link to that draft.
Right.
So wife now trumps whoever you were with before.
Okay.
Your child, if it is your child.
We've all got a little bit more work, but take the rest of the evening off. How about that?
Sounds good. Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
I was just wondering if you mind if I ask a question. It has to do with your civilian complaint review board. So you're one of the towns that's had one for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still like looking for the link on the site that you sent me for your report, but that's really what we're trying to push for on the community side down here in New Rochelle. But we're being met with a lot of resistance by the city council. And so I was just wondering if anywhere in your report you speak to either the successes or the failures or just, how it's been having a civilian complaint review board.
We have some changes that we're making to the civilian complaint review board. Part of the way that ours is structured is that there are police on it as well. And one of the things that we're talking about is just having civilians on it. So it really is a civilian body. I'm the chair though, and I can have a conversation with you about how it's been going. Rodolfo there was on it before. I think it's changed a little bit since between when he was on it and when I joined, which was 2020. So we might, I don't know if he can have a conversation, but I would definitely be happy to talk to you about how it's been going.
Yeah, because of just being respectful, because of Richard Ear and John being on this, I don't know if we're even able to kind of talk about this here and anything, but I'm more than happy to, for me and Jennifer or anybody really to talk to you offline about this. I think regardless of how the way it is a successful thing, it's done correctly, right? And in my eyes, yeah, any town that's against it is just being obstructionist. So just kind of looking at it with those eyes, but we're more than happy to talk to you about it. So.
Thank you. Yeah. I so appreciate that. How would you like me to put my email in the chat? What's the best way to?
If you look in the chat, Jennifer just added her email in there as well as Christina and her phone number. You can reach out to them, and then y'all have my information too. So just wrote me in, and loop me in how it's needed, and I'd be more than happy to jump in as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, Richard?
Bring us in if you need us as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Practice and forming them based on our experience elsewhere, that'd be good.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yes. Chelsea, that Ossining, one of the differences that we've had from, I think, most other municipalities is that we got to work with a consultant to help us with this, who did a lot of the research and has done this in other towns as well. And I think we're one of the only municipalities in Westchester that did this, if not the state, and I think that's been very helpful.
No, the state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, any chance, like Richard just mentioned, Richard is one of the consultants with Matrix Consultants. So if there's, anything that I think they'd also be very good resources.
Thank you so much for being willing to dialogue with me. I really appreciate it.
Certainly.
Yeah,
No problem.
we're all in this together.
All right.
That's right.
Your doctor about once weekly Trulis.
But yeah, you can text me if you want, or send me an email, like whatever works best for you.
Your cool mom. The more phone, more fun.
All right. Well, have a good evening, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Certainly next week. We'll see you later. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Night.
Bye.
Treat yourself responsibly.